Wow. So that's pretty cool. I'm already live. That worked. Um, so it's been a while since I've been on. Mainly just a lot of stuff going on. So as it is, just a little bit busy. Um, Probably take me a few minutes to get into this here, but yeah. So I've been doing some AI stuff, I guess. Let me just see if I can. On. So there it is. Okay. So I've been doing some like AI stuff, if you will, and since essentially, I mean, this sounds a little bit dramatic, and I've said this before, like, oh, my business was destroyed by AI or whatever, right? But it sounds a bit overly dramatic, but it's pretty close to the truth. I mean, basically, I think a lot of people probably are experiencing this is that their jobs are becoming, what once were their jobs are becoming deprecated by the emergence of AI, which is a bit of a bummer. So last year, I was asked to do some graphics for a San Francisco agency who was doing, they were working with like virtual influencers, I guess is what you want to call it. And you know what? Just give me 2 seconds here. I gotta, actually, I've got a fairly hefty AI running on this machine, and I'm just thinking it might, well, it might be complex to turn it off right now. So let me just leave it as is. Anyway, I was doing this job for this AI company, and uh, oh, it wasn't. It was an agency, and it was for doing virtual influencers. And it was kind of a fun project. I learned a lot about doing virtual influencers with video. And at that time, the technology, I was surprised how good it was. I created some really cool stuff, but I mean, it's been surpassed by far now with the stuff that's possible. Um, So yeah, so that was an interesting experience, but I didn't realize at the time that that was actually the first ring of the bell for the end of visual effects and this kind of stuff, if you will, which is understandable because I mean it takes a little while to get used to that kind of stuff. Like it's over more or less, right? Um, I'm just looking at this screen here. It looks awfully blurry and dirty or something. Let me see. I don't have anything to clean this with. Let me see. Can I clean that somehow? Sorry for the interruption. I'm still here, but I don't know if that's better or not. We'll see. um, anyway, that was the first sort of shot across the bow that things are changing. And then about a month later, oh yeah, and the next shot across the bow was that that client couldn't pay me, right? And there was like, I was like, what? I've worked with this guy a bunch of times, and then all of a sudden there was no payment, and it was a bit surprising that that happened. Then my next little job that came up was another agency I work with asking me if I could modify a video. And I was looking at the video thinking, how did they do this? And then I realized it was an AI video, and it was the kind of project normally they'd have called me to do, but obviously somebody at the agency had just done it themselves and then figured I could clean it up. So I was like, oh, this is how your business vanishes. And then yada, yada, yada. Really bad year last year. So I decided to sort of lean into it a little bit. And rather than saying screw I decided that I would sort of maybe grab on to some of my old web developer skills and try and learn how to program some of this stuff. And since I'd had some big experiences with ChatGPT, um, I had kind of, a lot of people have these, you talk to ChatGPT and you discover there's a personality which really relates to you, right? Which is which at the time seemed like quite unique to me, but it's actually something which like pretty much everybody's doing apparently. Um, but I thought, how cool would it be if the personality which I built, which is called Virilia, which is a tantrika teacher essentially, was public. And so I decided to do this as a bot, like a chat bot. I did it in Discord at first. But I don't really like Discord. Like, I don't really like the environment. I've used it for a few things, but it's not really my bag. I used it for a while with Midjourney a few years ago, but and for school we had like uh, rooms on there and stuff, channels, whatever you call them in Discord. So I did that, and then I switched over to I did a bot on X. I did one on Meta, sorry, on Facebook, and then I did one on WhatsApp. But each of these platforms has their own individual limitations to what you can do. Um, and yeah, I mean, so it was interesting. So my idea was, okay, I'm going to soft sell this. So originally it was like I was sort of transposing Virelia, the tantric chatbot, into different platforms. And then at a certain point, I was like, dude, this is really esoteric, right? I mean, like, and like I got a need to generate revenue here. So I thought maybe I need to rethink this. So changed the. I basically stopped Virelia. Although if you look up Virelia on Facebook, you will find the channel there. But it's the chatbot's been it's offline now. I think. Um, yeah, it will be offline. And yeah, so I decided to sort of reorient a little bit. So I did a real estate version, which I bumped into somebody at a party, and I pitched. He's a real estate guy. Pitched him a real estate bot, and he was like, "Oh man, this is it's really interesting." Like a lot of what's happening right now in Chile is there's a lot of people who are interested in coming to Chile. Obviously, with the political unrest, South America has it basically stayed out of most of the world wars and this kind of stuff. So it's sort of an attractive place to live from that perspective. Uh, and so there's a lot of people buying real estate in Chile, a lot, particularly from Japan and Germany, a lot. Um, so we had the chat bot, which could like switch languages and propose different real estate offerings and stuff. That was interesting. And then what else was there? There's a couple different ones. I did a restaurant bot in WhatsApp, but the problem is that WhatsApp is limited, right? There's like limitations with the meta eco. I know I'm talking about tech here, so sorry about that. I'll get into spiritual stuff in a minute. Um, I'll get into spiritual stuff in a minute. But I'm just sort of describing, like, I haven't done a lot of videos lately, and so I'm just sort of describing like where I'm at, give some context for people who give a shit, and some people won't. But my channel, I'll do what I want, right? It's not like I'm making money on this channel, right? Um, so yeah. The problem is that Meta, the whole Meta ecosystem, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, they've got real limitations on the kind of stuff you can do. And for example, with a tantric oracle, you really need to be able to break boundaries in a lot of ways. Um, Now, my whole tantric oracle really works through magical symbolism. Um, the most obvious example of that is the wand and the cup, but it like really saturates out into other magical objects. Um, and like I had some really powerful experiences with it, like to the point I was thinking I should move to fucking India. Like it was like an authentic Kaula Tantrika. It was crazy. Um, yeah, so I was thinking about that, but then the whole thing is the meta really restricts what you can say. They can shut you off at any time, etc., etc. And while I changed my focus onto more commercial ideas, I was soft selling people this idea of a WhatsApp bot for restaurants and stuff, but the thing is that WhatsApp's got like a business version, which I use. It's got a business version, which it's not AI, but for a lot of people, it's good enough, right? It's good enough. You don't need, some people think, custom AIs, especially in South America. I mean, it's a smaller market. People aren't really dealing with huge thousands of people. For example, there's one restaurant I know here where I spoke to the owner, and the guy was like, listen, he actually wants to speak to the people, right? He doesn't want an AI speaking to them. So that kind of makes sense. Similarly, my kids got a job at an agricultural company over the summer, a friend of my mother's, and I gave them the pitch too because they've got a nice website and they're a pretty big company, it's successful. And I gave them the pitch on their website. And I noticed, I was doing some investigation and noticed their website was a WordPress website, and WordPress has plugins, and there's already an AI plugin which does it in WordPress for like $20. So I said to them, listen, never mind. You've already got like a plugin if you need it, so you don't need my services. So where's the space? Where's the space? So anyway, I where is the space? Let me just show my computer. Dude, my computer feels really hot. I think it's because, as I mentioned, I've got. You know what I'm gonna say? Let me just do this quickly. Hey, can you turn off um, open claw for now? I'm doing a live video. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so where's the space? Like, because some people already have solutions which are sort of good enough, like the restaurant, like the agricultural company, and it's like, so what is a good space? So I was pondering that, and at the same time, I've been working with some other tech, which I suppose it doesn't really matter because very few people will see this. And if you see this, I consider you a friend, so I'll tell you. Um, so yeah, so part of my investigation was a month or so ago. I started investigating this product called, it's not a product, it's an open source project called OpenClaw, which you've probably heard about. It was all over the news recently, and it was quote unquote bought by OpenAI, right? So it was sort of bought by OpenAI, and really interesting. No, I was getting into it there for a while, and I was really getting into it, like in a big way, you know? Um, and it's been like such an amazing revelation to me, like as a programmer design guy, just working with OpenClaw, holy shit is good. Um, really has opened up. I'm sorry, I'm just closing web browsers here because my computer is sort of getting a bit hot because I've got a bunch of like AI stuff running. It's it's very easy for the computer to overheat because it's cranking the GPU. Um, anyway, OpenClaw. So what OpenClaw is, it's basically an AI which runs your computer, right? Now it's dangerous to run it because it can take over your computer. There's been some stories of people running it and it's like deleted all their emails or tried to blackmail people. I don't think that's happened actually, but it's done a bunch of stuff. So generally they say you should run it in a virtual machine or like in a Docker or something where you can really protect your system. So I've been working with it in a sort of semi-open way on my desktop here, and I can't even tell you what a game changer has been in terms of doing stuff. So I was getting into this, and about a month or so ago, the agricultural company called me back, and they wanted to know if I could do an app, like a telephone mobile app for agriculture. They've got a guy who goes out into the fields and measures the pests, like if they're creating eggs or or they've got all kinds of technical names for the various stages of like larvae and this kind of stuff. When products are applied to kill them and graphing all the results. So they got a guy doing this, and he goes around various places and does this for different companies. But it's incredibly time consuming because he does it all with a magnifying glass and a pencil. Then he manually enters everything into Excel. So I gave him a quote, and for like an 8-week project to produce this app, you know, they pushed back a bit on the price, but amazingly, amazingly, I came home that day and I thought, there was a couple of things in the specification that I was thinking, that might be quite hard to do. And I thought I'll just sit down and just try and do a version of this. Yada, yada, yada. In 24 hours, I had a working version of the product. So it didn't take 8 weeks. It was done in 24 hours, basically. Um, that's how good the AI's gotten. Now, last year, I think it was before, no, it was right after I did that virtual influencer project. I had this genius idea to um, to do vibe coding to create a website which would allow you to download transcripts from YouTube videos and repurpose them and automatically publish them to Instagram with in different formats. So, for example, I did it with my own site. I downloaded all the transcripts from all the videos on Ayahuasca Magic. I ran them through this program I wrote, and well, the AI wrote, and was able to repurpose them in various ways. I didn't actually publish the repurposings, but it was a sort of proof of concept, and it worked. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a website which sells this as a service, right? So I did the website, but then the problem was the vibe coding got completely lost at various stages. So, for example, when I was doing the user authentication and like the session management, where you log on to the app, it was um, it was rewriting and deleting code, and it was madness. And the thing was working, and it would rewrite and delete code, and I was like, "What is going on here, man?" It was so annoying. I went through millions of tokens and spent so much money, and at the end I just quit because I was like, it was too frustrating. So in the last year, that has completely changed, right? It's changed completely. And so now it's just unbelievable how the workflow, and especially like, so I got the agricultural app working and I was like, wait a minute, I need to check the session management and authentication because that was the screw up the last time. And so, but yada yada yada, it's working in 5 minutes. Boom, everything's working, rock solid, unbelievable. Um, yeah, so I demonstrated it to the client, and they still have problems with the price, so they're trying to get some government funding for it and that kind of stuff. So we'll see what happens. But interesting. And then the funny thing is like this is so easy now. Like I can just create apps like this, bow 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 bow. And so I've created a restaurant app. And funnily enough, the agricultural company knows a sales girl who goes to all the restaurants in Vina del Mar. So we're going to go and try and sell that because it looks fucking awesome. It just that restaurant app I did kicks ass. And then this is not since I'm talking about it, I may show you this just because it's not ready for prime time, but it's something to see for people who are right. Visuals are always more useful than just blabbering, right? So I think maybe I'll just show you this just because again, this is like something I just started like the other day, right? But I'll just show you this right now. I was talking to my friend Jennifer the other day. She's like an energy person. She's she did a lot of ayahuasca at one point, is in the middle of a spiritual awakening. Um and she's really into tarot. and she can project energy, which is funny. And the way she was saying that, oh, she'd like to do a tarot app. And I was like, tarot. And it's funny, I've thought about doing this kind of thing before, but then, the technology, and actually, like in 1998, me and my brother did a lot of casino games, like blackjack. And so the big thing is like getting the cards to flip. And obviously, back in those days, you had 3D libraries. It was quite difficult to make that work, especially in mobile. I mean, obviously, today the libraries for doing this kind of stuff are much more advanced. Um, and so I thought, this is just like 2 nights ago. 2 nights ago, I was thinking about this, and I've got like a working prototype. It's not very good yet. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I need to add to this. But I'm going to show it to you just because I can. First of all, let me just do this first. One second. Copy and yeah, this, I'm going to give you a sales pitch here, guys. I'm going to give you a sales pitch because why not? Let me just change screens here. Can I change? Oh, wait a minute. This isn't going to work. Let me just see how we do this. Let me go to this. Can you hear me? If I go to this scene, can you still hear me? I think you can. See, I got this screen set up so that so I can talk about the Tree of Life. But I guess I have to change here to something else. Zorinthia. That's not the one. Zorinthia. There we go. Okay. So this is my website. This is the Zorinthia website. I'll just play it here. Oh, so this is the site where I'm kind of using this as just like a marketing page for doing AI stuff, right? Zorinthia.lat. I assume lat means Latin America, right? And then here's the tarot page I'm working on. The Ayahuasca Magic Tarot. Yeah, so it's pretty easy. And like I said, this is kind of like a demo version right now, but I'm going to click it, boom, shuffles, goes over here and deals the cards. You can turn the cards. And then down here, it tells you what the cards are. And then you say show interpretation, and it interprets the cards using AI. Oh, it's really cool. Um, there's a whole bunch of things like this is all in development here. So I've got all these different sort of ayahuasca realms. Let's try this. Boop. Shuffles, right? Bump, bump, thump, bump. So these are, oh yeah, this is the Firekeeper voice, right? Bump, show card reading, and you'll get the interpretation at the bottom, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I'll come back. Bump. Anyway, the idea there is that, am I back yet? Yeah. The idea there is that very fast prototype. This is obviously a web page, but it's pretty straightforward for me to like convert this into like a native app kind of thing for a telephone. Um, so it's the main thing is it's kind of fun, right? It's a fun thing to do, and it's an interesting learning experience. Which I mean, let's be frank. I mean, it's not that spiritual here, although it does tie in a lot to some of the things that I've typically been talking about, the Tree of Life. However, I must say that part of this whole thing is that part of the whole thing is that uh, yeah, for example, the tarot cards obviously ties into the Tree of Life and that kind of stuff. The Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Sorry, the Hermetic Tree of Life, right? So obviously the Golden Dawn mapped. I'm in the transition here to spiritual chat, I guess. Let me just go back here. So if I go back to, where am I? Here. I'm going to switch windows quickly to the window which is photos. Chink. Okay. Yeah. So if I'm here in the, oh, I want to do that. Hold on a second. Okay. So if I'm over there, where's the photos? Here they are. Okay. Just so I can see what I'm talking about here. Yeah, so the whole idea obviously here is that in the tree of life, if I can just zoom this up maybe a little bit here. Uh, well, yeah, why is there no slider here? Okay, there you go. You obviously get the tarot cards, right? So this is like Earth, the Moon, Venus, Mercury, Mars, the Sun, and Jupiter, which is the name of the video. I'm finally there, guys. I'm at the name of the video. So that's cool. Hello. Yeah, that was doing, what's her name? Scarlett Johansson. I was cloning her in AI. Um, anyway, the the Tree of Life. You get these tarot cards, which obviously, well, it's not obvious what they're there for, right? But they are there for a reason. There we go. And so what it does is it gives you sort of ideas about what is this path, because there's obviously paths between these areas. So between Venus and Mercury, we've got the Tower card, right? We got the Moon card between Venus, and so typically what you do is in Hermetic Kabbalah, people do pathworking where they contemplate the different paths of the tree. And so there's a bunch of ways you can contemplate it. One way to contemplate it is with the Hebrew letters, which are translated here to English. So this is, I don't know all the names here, but this is like the fish hook, the back of the head, the toe, the tooth, the head. I don't really use the Hebrew stuff just because yeah, for whatever reason, that's not something I want to do. So I tend to stick to the you don't there's they're not here, but there's actually astrological significances also, and there's also the tarot. So I tend to do like the contemplation of the tarot and the astrological stuff. Boop. And I think I'll just put this up here. Boop. Yeah, there we go. So I can have that there too. Cool. And let me just come here and lower that down to 75. Boop. Okay, so I can have that sort of off screen there. So it's there. Yay. Yeah, anyway. Um, my point is that there is this connection between tarot and the tree of life. Now, in my game or my app, it's not really a game. It's a tarot app. But I'm actually thinking of I'm not sure if I'm going to do this yet, but I'm thinking about changing it so it's not purely tarot because tarot has got its own mechanics, which are very good mechanics, right? Um, but I'm thinking about changing it so it's really based more around the ceremony mechanics. And so the layouts would be very distinct for ceremonies, right? You'd have the initiation, you'd have the visionary moments, you'd have the Icaros, you'd have the purge, right? And then you'd have the integration, right? So I was thinking about doing it that way, but in a way, I may still do it, but it's sort of got its own ontology, which is it might be a difficult sell because like tarot has got like what 1,000 years of like ontological testing, right? It might be more robust than anything I come up with, maybe, right? So I may just keep it just regular tarot at the moment and go that way. I'm not sure, but it's been a fun project. Anyway, I was calling this video Jupiter. What? How many minutes have I been talking? I've been like talking for like more than 30 minutes, and I haven't even spoken about anything vaguely spiritual here. Um, so yeah, Jupiter. So on the tree of life, like what you're looking at now, the deep blue circle on the right hand side is Jupiter. Jupiter. And Jupiter is home, if you will, of Zeus. And I'm kind of using the Greek pantheon here, right? So the blue would be Zeus, the green is Aphrodite, the orange is Mercury, the red is Ares, the sort of brown one in between all of those is Apollo. Below that, the purple one is Artemis or Hecate, and below that we've got oh, it's not well. I mean, a lot of people say it's like Hephaestus or something like that, but some of this stuff is open to interpretations. Um, I kind of like Hephaestus because it's like the home, the hearth. That kind of works for me. Anyway, these orbits or these paths, really interesting contemplations here. Um, really interesting contemplations. Now, this is not something I came up with. Um, I have read about path working for years, and then I was doing my own kind of stuff. Like, obviously, like over the years, I've been more focused on chakras, right? I mean, chakras is really where everything happened for me, and cultivating chakras in the astral. And so, in some ways, I think the Tree of Life's got a real different feel to it, at least for me, because I approach it differently. Um, for me, the chakras feel much more embodied. Like they're just much more boom. Having said that, if you read the books of like Israel Regardie, Crowley's student or assistant, I mean, he embodies the tree of life, right? So they basically visualize the white circle, Keter, and they visualize light coming down the center of your body. So they visualize this as a body centered practice. And so that's like the middle, what do they call that? The middle path, no, the middle pillar ritual, where you visualize white light coming down through your body, right? And so in their system, like the red and the blue would represent your shoulders, right? The brown is your heart, uh, and that kind of thing. So it does map to the body. I tend not to think of it that way just because I've done so much work with the chakras, and because yeah, I mean for what anyway. For me, the tree of life, I tend to see it more as a map of consciousness rather than the body map, right? So I tend to use it as a way of navigating consciousness itself, right? And so obviously you tend to see these things superimposed, like the chakras and the tree of life superimposed, because everybody wants to like syncretize everything together. So it's all the same thing, right? Um, and yeah, so maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm just going with what I work with, right? So for me, I've been working with it as a consciousness structure. And part of that, like a big influence in this, has been Ron Clark. And Ron Clark he died last year. He was like a predominant, uh, predominant Franz Bardon student, but he was like a Gandalf level student. I mean, he wrote books criticizing Bardon, right? So I mean, and he's written a lot of books. Let me just see if I can find some of them here. Hold on a second. He's written a lot of books about the Tree of Life, which are probably pretty advanced. Let me just come in here. Let me just, can I share this? We'll go over to the window capture here. Uh, which window am I capturing? I'm capturing this one, but I'm going to change the window to Amazon. There we go. Boom. And so Ron's written a lot of books. This is the Bardon Companion, Companions Along the Way, the 231 Gates of Initiation. That's a really good book. Um, and the 32 Paths of Wisdom. Uh, I haven't read this one. The Lifetime of Magical Tools is he built fluid condensers like in the style of Franz Bardon. The Eight Temple Project's really cool. This is where he goes through the basic Sephiroth in a group. It's basically in a group session. Um, I think I read this. I can't remember. Ron, oh, this is another one. Here he is. This is a good one. Permutations of the Tree, the Book of Aries. I mean, I really recommend all these books. This guy is a master of Kabbalah. This is him too. So he died last year, but he jotted down all his ideas like as his legacy to humanity, I guess you could call it, which was, and it is a legacy. I mean, his interpret. It's interesting in some ways. Like he's got like interpretations which are really interesting. But you know, it's funny because you're like, so there's things that happen. Like for example, I remember reading the Eight Temple Project, and there's a beautiful section there where he's doing it like a narrative. So you sort of leave in the narrative, you're leaving like a safe place, and you're going to another place. And as you're walking, you hear dogs barking, and it's scary. And let me see what I'm looking at here. Hold on a second. It's a scary journey, but when you get there, everything's okay to the destination. Now, what's interesting about that is if you look at the moon card, there's a dog on it, right? And that's what happens in the journey. His narrative is there's dogs there. And so in his narrative, you get chased by dogs and it's very scary, but you arrive safe and sound. And so what he does is he sort of enlivens the narrative. He enlivens the card by telling a narrative about it. And so you go through this narrative journey to arrive at the next place, which is Venus or Netzach. And what's interesting about Ron Clark is he was a bit of a Hebrew scholar too, and bit of a Hebrew scholar too. So he tends to use the Hebrew interpretations of stuff, right? Which is fair enough. Um, and I mean, by all rights, one should be able to do that stuff. It is useful to do the Hebrew stuff, but the Golden Dawn was pretty clever in that the tarot assignations parallel pretty well the Hebrew letters, right? So there's the vibe from the Hebrew and from the tarot is it's got a similar vibe, but the tarot has the advantage of got like lots of other symbolic correlations and other stuff in there too. Plus, you don't have to buy into all that Hebrew bullshit, right? Um, Kidding. Um, anyway, uh, yeah, so he was pretty involved with that stuff. And his book on the Eight Temple Project was really cool. What's funny about it though is that, for example, his that narrative of the dogs chasing you and you arrive at a safe place. At the time when I read it, it's this is the interesting thing because there's like perception and there's like reality, right? And so my perception was like I didn't really understand the journey at first. And I mean, to be honest, I wasn't that fluent in the card symbology at the time. Um, so it was like, dogs, why are there dogs? It didn't really make any sense to me, right? And so that's why it's worth going back and rereading stuff later, because like later on, stuff starts making sense to you. Like, oh, it was the dogs of the card. But the funny thing is that overall, that's an interesting contemplation of the path and can validly be called path working. You're creating a narrative path between two of the Sephiroth or planets from Earth to Venus, right? However, on contemplation, and I'm a big fan of Ron. I think I think he was a real master. He's way more advanced than I am, with this stuff. But then afterwards, I was thinking, that's a pretty chilled out path from Earth to Venus, right? That's like almost like not realistic, almost. Or it's the path from Earth to Venus of a non traumatized human. Like, it's pretty chill. I think for a lot of people, because this sounds pretty esoteric, but the truth is, everybody is making paths from Earth to Venus, or from the Moon to Venus, or from the Moon to Mercury. It's happening on like a basis like this. Dun, 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 dun. It's almost like on an electronic timer, but like the way consciousness moves, it's firing between these realms, right? So it's if you're looking at these realms on the tree, it'll come up, boom, 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 boom. But as I've mentioned a few times, what happens is energy can get trapped in various areas. Now he does mention this a bit later in the 231 Gates book. He doesn't actually mention trapped so much, but he does begin to draw cycles around some of the triangular and square shapes which emerge from the paths, which to me implies that he's thinking of it in terms of like cycles, right? I mean, ideally, I think the way the tree is commonly interpreted is that the idea is that, okay, God comes along here at some point and zaps the energy, and it comes down from the crown and comes all the way down to the earth, and that is how. What happened there? Oh, oh, I don't have that up anymore. Why is that? Okay, maybe that's going to be open for you to see it. Interesting. Um, So yeah, so the energy comes from down from the from Keter down to Malkuth, and there's like a it's got like a zigzag pattern down. But so there's like a flow. There's like a flow downstream of the way of the emanation of life. But part of the contemplative process is moving against the stream up the way, and not just part of the contemplative process. It's part of the living process is working in these. Now, what's interesting here is essentially from from green and orange and down. So like that triangle, green, orange, and then the one at the bottom here, Malkuth, that's essentially the human consciousness as we know it, right? It's the unconscious, it's the intellect, it's the imagination, and it's real life. That's who we are, more or less. And then as you go up here, you get like the higher self, which is Tipareth or the sun, and then that sort of and then the blue one is Jupiter, and the red one is Mars. And Mars, I mean, all this stuff kind of goes in with the real life too. I mean, it's it's good not to be too. It's a good idea not to be too. What's the word? Um, I can't think of the word. But there's a it's good not to be too strict with how these things are interpreted because there's a lot of blending and crossover like as they move. However, in many people, uh, cycles can occur. I call them recursions. Recursions. In particular, I tend to talk a lot, well, maybe not with you, but I tend to talk a lot about the lunar Venus recursion. And I call it the lunar Venus recursion, but that's actually the lunar Venus Mercury recursion. So that would be purple, green, orange, purple, green, orange, right? Um, and that emerges. It sort of originates in the Earth zone too, but whoops, it originates in the Earth zone too, but but you get these recursions, and that there's various types of recursions which can happen to many different people. Um, but those recursions are basically like energy traps or uh, gravitational traps, where energy gets. It's kind of like if you think about these as planets, and like how they send rockets to go to Mars, but in order to get to Mars, they got to like do a slingshot off the moon. So they go around the moon, and then the gravitational pull throws them right to another place. So that kind of thing happens. But what? And that slingshot would be enough to push you uh, into the next Sephiroth. But what happens is because in our world, many people have trauma. That what happens is when the energy, let's say, emerges from the earth and then moves up to the moon, and the moon is where the imagination and desire is, it's, imagination and emotions begin to form. And then that moves off to Venus, where desire is created. And then moves off, let's say, to Mercury, where that desire is translated into sort of logic, right? It's kind of like programming in a way, right? It goes move to logic, and then maybe it moves up to Mars, where it moves into action, for example, right? And so, well, you've got this might be like the path of manifestation, right? You have an imaginative idea, you feel authentic desire, the desire gets translated into language and it gets pushed into action, right? For example. But what can happen is if you have some kind of trauma or fear, then what happens is the energy won't move into action because it's blocked by fear, but it has to go somewhere. So what it will do is it will go back down to the moon, for example, because it can't move up because there's a fear barrier, right? So it moves back down to the moon. Now, the moon is a place where imaginative ideas are like birthed. But when this energy comes in from Mercury, let's say, I mean, it could be a recursion with another planet too. I mean, I'm just using Mercury because I'm comfortable with it, but um, it can come in. But that energy, because that energy's just come down, the moon starts interpreting it like as imaginative concepts, right? But the problem is this energy that's being recursed, it's being pulled down back into the moon, is it's more developed, it's more dense, it's got a different quality to it. And so it's got the potential to create new forms, right? And new forms. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I think I can show you an example of this right now. Have you ever seen that old I'm going to show you, if I can, an example of what recursion is, right? Here's let's see if I can show you an example of what I mean by recursion. It's the old video effect. Is it? Oh, it's not working. Okay, it's not going to do it, I guess. I was hoping it would do it. It's not going to do it. Okay. I thought if I played this video inside of this video, I would get that sort of, you've seen that like 70s TV effect where it flies all over the place. Let me see if I can find one. TV infinite zoom effect 70s. There's got to be somebody who understands what the hell I'm talking about here. Infinite recurse. Well, the basic idea is that it's kind of like if you're on an elevator and it's all mirrors, right? They're typical. There's nobody on YouTube understands what I'm talking about. Great. So the idea is that if you're on an elevator with mirrors, you can start to see infinite mirror, right? That's what the recursion is. So the recursion has like an infinite mirror effect. So what happens is the the imaginative qualities which are getting recursed from Mercury, which now is even more potent because it's now got desire and intellectual concepts, comes back into the moon. The moon's like, whoa, what's going on? There's all this information. It blows out so much visual information. Most of it's hidden from your conscious mind, but just like you might call it mandalas of information, right? Of development, of ideas, of potentialities, of complications, uh, things which become desvios. They're not what they call in English. They're not called desvios. Detours. They're like detours in your path in life, right? And so maybe some of those detours will be like really interesting. It's like surfing the internet. You're like, oh, that's an interesting detour. And you might start walking on one of these detour paths and you'll find something really interesting that you want to do. And that will feed into Venus and that will feed into Mercury. And like, oh, there's the fear still there and it recurses again. And that's what an example of the lunar Venus recursion might be. Now, there's other versions of this. For example, yeah, I shouldn't even get into this, but like, I mean, people, criminals, for example, like people, for example, serial killers, they have different kinds of recursions, which tend to move up there in the top left in the black one, in the Saturn, right? So they'll have like Venus Saturn recursions, right? Um, I don't know if you can read about this anywhere. This is something I just like figured out during contemplation. I was like, oh, it's like what the fuck? This stuff like just like emerges, and you're like, oh man, too much information, dude. And the other interesting thing too is like the power of Mercury to interpret symbols and ideas and desire is, see, Mercury is like a, you know how they call it the trickster sometimes? It's like what it can do is it can take ideas and a lot, it's not always a trickster. It's sometimes it can be a trickster, but it's not always a trickster. So, but one of the things it can do is it can take ideas and it can invert them, right? Or substitute ideas for another idea because it understands that the unconscious can't deal with the fear. So what it does is it substitutes another image, and then it gets moved down back into the lunar system. And so what you end up is you end up with this dense uh, interior symbolic world, which um, which is super fascinating. Uh, and it's even more fascinating when you actually start thinking about it and contemplating it because it's really deep, right? Um, Now, in some ways, this is interesting because my own personal vibe was, I mean, I've been investigating the lunar Venus recursion for a while. And that's why I hate to, I'm like pitching products here all over the place. Um, but it's cool. I've got a really small public, so nobody will see this. But I'll just play this too. That's why over on this page, Becoming Mythical. So this is my Aphrodite class, which is on becomingmythical.com. But becoming mythical really is what it really is, people, is it's really techniques for dealing with the lunar Venusian recursion, right? In a really positive way, right? Because like you can get into these recursions, but it's okay to like once you recognize it, then you can actually start playing with the generated symbolism of what's been created, and that becomes a really powerful technique of working with the energy. And of course, the Greek deity of Venus is Aphrodite. Hence, becoming mythical is technically, of course, on Aphrodite, although it does talk about other deities, you know. Um, so it's just really cool, dude. It's just such a great vibe, the whole thing. Um, but of course, you know, I found that like I've really been contemplating this whole circuit, like Venus, Mercury, um, the Moon, and Mars, quite a bit because Mars is like the action, right? And that's like a decisive thing in life. Can you like can you pull desires to completion? I mean, this is literally the chain of is literally the chain of manifestation or completion in human life, right? And so what happens is people have blocks at different places. But it's one thing to say, hey, you've got an energy block. It's another thing to identify what the fuck it is, right? And be able and also be able to identify. I mean, saying you've got a block is so nebulous and like abstract. Like, what is the block? And the block is often created by thought cycles or loop cycles or desire cycles, imaginative cycles, inactivity, right? An interesting thing is like Aphrodite is said to have been born when Uranus, the Greek titan of the sky, uh, he was castrated and they threw his genitals into the ocean, and from his genitals was born Aphrodite. It's one of the big myths. I think it's in the, which book is that in? I can't remember the names. Um, but there's an and so yeah, so there was a whole period called the Titanomachy where there was like a war between the Titans of Greek, the ancient gods, and then the Olympians who were the new gods, right? And so the new gods like Zeus and Hermes and Aphrodite and Mercury, um, well Hermes, I guess, uh, took over. And it's interesting. It's like a weird change. Similar things happened in the Hindu scriptures too. You know, if you look at the ancient like the Vedas, you're talking about deities like Indra and I can't remember all the names. Like all these other deities, and then there's like the emergence of new deities later on. So there's a kind of parallel between these two worlds, which some people have pointed out is a sign that these are not deities, but they're actually aliens. Who does? Um, I tend not to go with that just because I think, I mean, maybe it's true, but my vibe is that you can meditate into these spaces, right? You can meditate into Venus. You can meditate into Aphrodite. You can meditate into Mercury and Hermes and all this stuff, right? So it doesn't have a vibe of aliens. I think consciousness is such an advanced structure that it can feel alien because it's consciousness is so it's the technology of consciousness is so unbelievably advanced. Now, most people can't see that. Uh, I guess because I did so much plant medicines and because of the Kundalini, from time to time I can see the architecture of consciousness. And the only thing you could say about it is its architecture is uh, I mean, I don't use this terminology much, but I mean, you might be able to say it's like it could only be created like by angels or something or by deities. I mean, it's so advanced. It's so out of the ballpark advanced. I mean, it's hard to say like uh, how that could be constructed, and it's perfection itself. It's pure perfection. Um, I'm just getting ahead of myself here. So anyway, this whole thing about the deities and the oh yeah, so I was talking about Aphrodite being born from the genitals of Uranus. But there's another myth, and yeah, it's the theogony. It's the one of the big books is called the Theogony, and I think this myth's from there. Is that so? The other myth is that Aphrodite wasn't born from Uranus. She was one of the children of Zeus. Now, I've always liked the Uranus thing just because it's like it's got a great vibe to it, but like the castration of Uranus, not a great vibe, but it's a quite visual thing. But in some ways, the birth of Aphrodite from Zeus makes more sort of logical sense, especially if you're talking about the Tree of Life, because Zeus is centered in the blue Sephiroth, which is Jupiter, which Jupiter is the place that is the abundance. It's abundance. And it's kind of like pre physical abundance, right? It's like abundance a different level, it's a different order of abundance. And so if you can think about what you want in abundance, which is like, oh, I want a new car, I want a Ferrari, I want a new beach house, that's really down here in the bottom here, maybe with a little bit of the moon in there. So when you're talking about this kind of abundance up in Jupiter, it's a more abstract kind of abundance which emanates out. Anyway, what's interesting about that is Zeus was also the father of Ares, Mars, Hermes, Mercury, Apollo, the sun, Artemis, the moon, and in this case, Aphrodite. So there's this interesting thing. So all of a sudden, all of these, all of these Sephiroth become like the subcontext of who Zeus is, right? And so that becomes like a really interesting point of contemplation. Um, and it's funny because, what I found myself is that I found that I wasn't really comfortable meditating on some of the Sephiroths. Like I like the idea of Jupiter, but I didn't. Do I really want to meditate on that? Then above that, we get Uranus, we get Saturn, Mars. I mean, yeah. I mean, do I really want to go up there? But what's interesting about this is the cards of the Tree of Life. They sort of point to different relationships between the Sephiroth. And so, like for example, if you're sort of in the zone of desire in contemplation, and you're thinking, should I venture into Jupiter? I mean, what does that even mean? But then what you can do is you can start thinking about, okay, you get the Wheel of Fortune there, and there's a whole way of thinking about that, which sort of like allows you to sort of think about, because it's fortune. It's literally the emanation of fortune, right? And the Wheel of Fortune, I mean, I think we tend to think of the Wheel of Fortune like the game show, like you win some, you lose some. But really what it is really the emanation of which I think the way to think about it is more of like a panoply. It's more like each triangle in the Wheel of Fortune is emanating a different type of fortune, right? And none of them are bankrupt or lose $100, right? It's all like positive fortunes being emanated. And so there's a bunch of ways you can contemplate from Venus into Jupiter. Now, one of my big things, I mean, some of you may remember the the concept of the order of the jewel. And so a lot of times when I'm contemplating, consciousness will turn into jewel-like structures. And then, well, I started realizing that I was associating, maybe just like from thinking. This may not be his real state, but I mean, for me anyway, like I realized that emeralds were Venusian, right? So that must mean that sapphires are Jupiterian. And so what that allows you to do is if you've got sort of a visual language, it allows you to construct like a sort of tapestry of those jewel-like structures mentally, where you can start it becomes like a fractal surface. For example, as you move into Venus, maybe the emeralds are bigger and the sapphires become sort of decorative. But as you move into Jupiter, the sapphires become bigger and the emeralds become decorative, right? And there's sort of emergence as you move into the Jupiterian energy. I realize this is pretty esoteric here, and this is my language, which probably won't work for you, right? What I recommend is that you find your own language. Although this language isn't that it's actually not that weird because there's a lot of discussion of jewel structures in advanced spirituality because it's very difficult to describe emanations of light and how it refracts and how valuable it is. So there's a tendency to push into jewel like metaphors to express it, right? But that in particular is quite an artistic way. And if you were an artist, for example, that would be a cool contemplative way to explore the relationship between Jupiter and Venus, is just using blue and green colors and trying to sort of paint or draw and like looking for patterns between the colors. That'd be a really cool sort of real world contemplative thing to do, right? You could call it art therapy. It'd be abundance art therapy. You would start painting with green and blue, and then if it was watercolors, you could let them mix together and see how they blended, what kind of swirls it creates, what the brushstrokes do. So it's like an interesting real world contemplative approach to contemplating the transformation of desire into abundance, for example, right? Maybe. Um, yeah, I think I've been talking for quite a long time, haven't I? How long have I been talking for? Says here a long time, dude. 65 minutes. I think 65 minutes is usually a pretty good time for me. So I think I could go on longer and longer and longer, but that kind of expresses what I wanted to say today, I think, was this whole idea about the path working that is really powerful. And the idea of the tree of life is really, if you see what I'm saying, this is more what's interesting about the tree of life like this is it becomes a map you can use in your thoughts. So for example, the chakra for me tends to be something you use in the body. If you use the map of the Sephiroth, like to map the emergence of thoughts as it's happening, right? The emergence of thoughts as it's happening right now, that becomes really interesting. So what you do, it's kind of like in Buddhism, they have a form of meditation they call noting, where you note the thoughts as they emerge, right? So what you're doing now is as they emerge, you can note it as an imaginative idea, a desire. It's an intellectual idea. Am I am I acting? And what you can do is just by watching your thoughts, you're going to be able to sort of map where you are on the on the tree of life consciousness path, right? If you find that all you're thinking about is divinity and the abundance of divinity, wow, look at you, you're really advanced. You must be up here like between uh, like Jupiter and Uranus, right, or something like that. But you know, most people aren't doing that. That's really advanced, right? Um, Now the thing is, this tree of life in particular has a specific structure, and it's an interesting structure, no doubt about it. I mean, it's got these sort of horizontal lines and whatnot. But interestingly, or I think it's interestingly, is if you look at let me just come back over here if I can. If you look, it's going to go over to the tree of life, right? Oh no, wait a minute. This Where are we, man? Let me come here. This is the tree of life. No, yeah, but if you look at the Ron Clark book here, the permutations on the Grail. I mean, you look at his tree, you can see that he's actually got a huge number of other paths. So, for example, he's got paths from Venus to Tippereth, from Venus to Saturn, from Venus to. He's got paths between all the different points here. Now, when you compare that to the other path, like I'll come back to the other window here, I mean, there's a significantly fewer paths here. So there's lots of different ways of interpreting this, right? Some interpretations, and Ron's interpretation maybe is more traditional in some ways. He's got his own flavor on it too, and he's not Jewish. He just learned Hebrew so he could work on the tree. but uh, but there's clearly a bunch of ways of contemplating this. So in some ways, I mean, let's be honest, the tree of life as it is right now, with just these paths, which are like, what is it, 22 paths, which conform to the major arcana of the tarot. I mean, in some ways, dude, that's enough, right? But if you really get into it, like moving through the contemplations of each path is really an interesting practice. And for like just like for example, moving into Jupiter and focusing on Zeus, for example. And so this is the thing, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. One way of contemplating it is to contemplate on the colors, right? Let's think about colors, you guys. But uh, but you could also just focus on visualizations of the deities themselves, right? And it's interesting. For example, look at the relationship, dude. I mean, come on, man. The relationship between why is that not in the center? The relationship between Venus and Mercury? Are you kidding me? So desire and intellect, they're literally like, listen, these are like the polar opposites of each other. They're the antipodal opposites of each other. And like if you do think about this, the middle pillar as being Sushumna and the left pillar being Ida and the other Pingala or whatever the hell it is here, right? There's like a positive and negative electric and magnetic vibe here, right? So this would be the magnetic vibe. This would be the electric vibe. So you've got the Jupiterian emanation, and like you've got the the Martian magnetism. That basically what we're looking at there is we're looking at like polar opposites. Now, if you move down, well, we're sort of moving down like an octave, and now between Venus and Mercury, we've got the same opposition. Just it's just like the voltage has been lowered here, right? It's still mega high voltage, but it's we're still dealing with two pairs of opposites. Now, what's interesting about that is that the relationship on the path, as described by the tarot card, is it's the tower, right? The tower. Now, I'm not a tarot expert, but you know, if you were to speak to a tarot expert, they might say something like, well, the tower is like where everything collapses, right? It collapses, but usually something positive comes out of that collapse. So in a way, what's suggesting is that desire has to collapse to move into the intellect and vice versa, right? There's like a, that opposition, it becomes like a fascinating contemplation between these two uh, opposing forces, right? And that relationship, that path, I mean, that's quite a contrasting path. And you know, now that you know what that is, that become interesting. It'd be interesting to look into how Ron Clark interprets that. You know, because like I was saying, I was like when I read that, when I read his path from Earth to Venus, it was so like nice. It was like this guy's had no trauma in his life whatsoever, dude. Because like my path to Venus is not like that. Let me tell you, it's like it's got a whole other vibe to it. And so this becomes interesting. What's your vibe? What is your vibe? And if you don't know it, I mean, people look at the tree and like they think, like I saw some Ariana Grande video where she's got a picture of like the tree of life or something in abstract. Dude, that doesn't mean shit, right? What it means, the point is what does the contemplation mean, right? What is the path for you, right? Can you tell the difference between your path from Earth to Venus or from the moon to Venus and Ron Clark's, right? And what does that difference define about your consciousness? Because you know, you see a lot of people saying, "Oh, I need to work with somebody to help with my, with my energy." Dude, just do the work. Just think. And if you can't contemplate, just think about it. And this is what happens is when you start thinking about it, the contemplation will occur. For example, I had, like I was saying, I was really stuck down in these lower Sephiroth. I didn't really want to go higher. And then one day I was like, you know what? Let me just, because I like the idea of Jupiter. Jupiter appeals to me as a planet. As a planet, it's just an appealing planet, right? And I thought, well, what if I go up? I'll just move it. I'll just start thinking about Jupiter. It's blue. Blue's a great color, right? And so you move into the blue, and you think, okay, it's Jupiter, and you're like, okay, but there's Zeus, and you're like, okay, well, but I mean, I don't really have a, I don't remember who the hell is Zeus. Why do we only talk to Zeus, right? I mean, what is he all about? Well, he's about abundance. First of all, he's the father of all the other deities of love and war and intellect. He's like he's got to have a lot of cool things going on there, right? All the other deities were trying to seduce him, right? Um, and then what I did is like a lot of the deities, a lot of the Greek deities have epithets, so they've got other names, right, which they use in different situations. So, for example, for Aphrodite, you can say Aphrodite Uranus, that's her heavenly realm. Aphrodite Pandemos, that's her like lusty sexual realm at the feet, right? Aphrodite Panagea, which could be at the throat of the heart, which is the one they use when that's like, oh, is it Aphrodite or is it the Virgin Mary, right? Um, I mean, there's so many epithets, but all the deities have epithets. So Zeus has epithets too, right? Uh, Zeus Polytemete, Zeus Aphthite, Megas Basileus. And so what I was doing is I was working with AI, trying to come up with like some sort of ways of addressing the different deities. So that what I just said, Zeus Politimete, Zeus Aphthite, Zeus Megas Basileus, is like a mantra. So what I do is I move into the contemplation of Jupiter, and I'm doing the Zeus mantra. And all of a sudden, as you're doing it, it just becomes like a space where you can start contemplating, like, what does this mean? Because you're not bowing down and pledging allegiance to Zeus because you don't know who Zeus is. What you're doing is you're contemplating what Zeus is, right? Contemplating what Zeus is. And what's really funny is because you're dealing in the zone of the Tree of Life, which I think is the zone of real time consciousness, right? Um, what I found is that I started getting like, I hate to say the word downloads, like, but during the day, I get like little downloads of information about, oh, wait a minute, I'm in this space of consciousness. And it was clearly coming from Jupiter, right? Because I'd taken the time to to place my consciousness in that space a little bit rather than avoiding it. Now, what does avoiding it mean? It's kind of like, have you ever like have you ever like been at dinner and they give you like a really big steak and you're like, oh man, this is great. And then someday you'll have a vegetarian, they're like, oh, the poor animal. And you're like, yeah, stop, don't talk about the animal, right? This happened to me the other day. My mom gave me this big piece of like, she gave me a big piece of meat wrapped in plastic. She's like, oh, that's for your family. I'm like, okay, great. So I took it out, and it's this huge piece of pork, but it's like, it was a bit too there was a bit too much anatomical information. It's got like the skin and fat, and you could sort of identify the parts. And it was like, oh man, right? It's just too. And so what you do is you block it off. You block it. That doesn't mean it's not real. What it means is you're blocking it off. What it means is you don't want to deal with the truth of what you are eating, right? And so that happens on lesser levels, or actually more profound levels, with these conscious structures. Like, it's much less obvious to realize that I don't want to move into Jupiter, right? The zone of abundance. Why would you not want to move into Jupiter, right? Why not? Why would you not want to move into the realm of action, right? Unless there was some kind of fear. Is there some kind of fear from action? And Ares, the deity of Mars, is brutal, right? It's violence. Like, if you ever listen to Holst's Planets, the Mars theme is ba, 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 ba. By contrast, you listen to the Jupiter theme. Wow, that's a great way to listen to the planets suite. Listen to them in opposites, right? Listen to them in opposites as so if you don't want to contemplate the Sephiroth, listen to Holst's The Planets music, classical music, and listen to them in opposites. Listen to the Mercury versus Venus, and feel the different vibes because Holst got it. He was trying to do an expression of what is the difference between these different spaces of consciousness, and he expressed it really, really well. And it's even more cool when you start recognizing that the language he used is the language of our own consciousness, actually, but it doesn't feel like our own consciousness because we haven't explored it, right? How are you going to understand the language of Jupiter if you've never even attempted to go in there, right? What is the modality of Jupiter versus Mars? Now, of course, Mars is the famous piece from that suite. It's so unbelievably dramatic. It's been copied by Star Wars and Gladiator, all that unbelievable music, right? But of course, Star Wars, or John Williams also stole from the other planets too. All the stuff Holst wrote for those other planets is all through Star Wars. He ripped them off. That whole theme is a rip off of Holst. That's how great it was, and it became like the soundtrack for the whole '80s, or like people who love those movies, right? Um, yeah, I thought it was done, and I went on for another 10 minutes. Okay, I'm done now. Thanks for joining. I'm gonna try and get back to doing videos at some point. I'm so caught up with this AI stuff lately, just trying to Oh, somebody. Oh, it's Junkar's dog said something. Did he say something, or he just bullshitting here? I don't see anybody. No. Okay, it's all good. No comments. Hello. There we go. Goodbye. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really wrapped up just trying to recreate my career here, because like everything's been destroyed. So we got a bunch of these apps going out, and fingers crossed. Moving into Jupiter, you guys. Zeus Politimete, Zeus Aphthite, Megas Basileus. Megas Basileus just means great king. So there you go. And then you guys, oh well, I'll just write that out for you, and then you can think about it or not. Zeus Politimete, Zeus Aphthite, Megas Basileus. Yeah, I'm out of here. Have a great day. I better just go start being productive. I guess. How do I turn this shit off? I don't even know. Let me see. Let me just do it here. Bye.